Feixiao is everything but your average hunt character, and today I am going to show you how to build her best. My name is Star Impact, let's begin! Starting with the ultimate, it is the most important for Feixiao. It contributes to 70% of her overall damage and deals a massive 700% of her attack spread over 7 instances at level 10. The best part is that it completely ignores weakness types of enemies and knocks down the toughness bars with an extra 100% efficiency, as long as they are unbroken. That goes even faster when you employ Raw Mei. Now the thing she shares with Acheron is that she doesn't use energy at all. Instead, she needs stacks to unleash her rampage. That's where her talent comes into play. She needs 6 flying Areo stacks at least to drop her nuke of a burst, and she can keep up to 12 at once, which allows you some flexibility to use it in an opportune time. Or, if you're fancy, you could as well just drop 2 nukes back to back if you want to make sure that the boss is not gonna get to play the game. She gets stacks in the following ways. For every 2 attacks of her team, including her own, except her ultimate, 3 stacks from A2 at the start of the battle, and 1 stack from a technique also at the start of the battle. So you can start every battle with 4 stacks right off the gate before anybody moved in the team. So the first burst you can get out really quickly, but you can take your time until she is properly buffed. For example, Feixiao can buff herself with 48% attack from her own skill and her A6, so never burst without it. But that's not all for the talent. Feixiao can launch follow-ups whenever a teammate attacks an enemy, which is limited to 1 per turn. The damage is okay, but the main dish here is that it also increases her own damage dealt by 60%, which lasts for 2 turns. So again, chillax your finger for more satisfaction. By the way, the skill makes sure at least 1 follow-up of hers gets out. So if by the time no other teammate has attacked yet, this would make sure it happens. But in case your mates attacked before, you get 1 more follow-up out regardless of what was said in the talent. So it is actually 2 per turn. So that follow-up damage adds up to a modest 20% of her total damage output, while the skill only makes up for 10%. The normals you can ignore, don't bother leveling those. Which gets us to her trace priority. Burst of a talent over skill. The technique is a quirky one, I can say so much. As mentioned, it gives a stack for your ultimate. But before you enter the battle, you can run around with it and suck up all your enemies on the field like a giant vacuum cleaner. It looks ridiculous to say the least, and there's no limit to how many you can suck, as long as you do it within 20 seconds. Then once you hit them, you can battle all units at once, and it deals damage every single turn to them, starting at 200% attack up to 1000% if you manage to drag 8 enemies. Pretty fun stuff. Alright, Ascension Traces. These things are very strong and important to Feixiao's kit. Starting with A2. That one gives her 3 stacks at the beginning of a battle. It also makes sure that Feixiao always gets at least 1 stack per turn if for some reason she didn't get a follow-up out from her talent. This can easily happen when she gets crowd controlled in the wrong moment, for example, which means she can't use her talent even when other teammates attack or not. The A4 makes her damage count as follow-ups, and on top increases her crit damage for follow-up attacks by 36%. A really juicy trace that is also the reason why the 4-piece wind soaring is so good on her. The A6 just happens to give a massive 48% attack buff for using her skill, just like that. And it lasts 3 turns, which doesn't matter at all as she uses her skill all the time anyway. The minor traces add up to 12% crit rate, 28% attack, and then your everyday oddball of 12.5% defense. Feixiao does nuclear crap tons of damage with her ultimate, which so happens to count as follow-up damage. And exactly this makes Feixiao the best slot abuser of the 4-piece wind soaring set. Her kit fits like a glove. and the set provides her with stats she craves for: attack, crit rate, and a huge chunk of ultimate damage bonus. For alternatives, you will look at 4-piece Ash Blazing. It provides her with a boost to her follow-up attacks, aka her burst, and attack percent for every follow-up hit. This sounds not so great at first glance with a burst, as the passive resets at the start of Feixiao's turn, but the ult hits not once but 7 times. And then there are also 2 more follow-ups she can do in between turns, so you will actually be able to make decent use of that set, but wind soaring is still better.
I am better!
Then you have the option to cope with 4-piece Pioneer, but since the buff Beauty has no debuffs in her kit, she would rely on allies to apply them. Okay, fine, it works, if you are into that kind of stuff. For 2-piece combinations you have attack percent, 4%, wind percent, and diver. No gear without Planar Ornaments, and while the relics were extremely straightforward, I can't say the same for these suckers. Best in slot is a tie between 2 sets, as they are better in different scenarios. Starting with the most straightforward one, the 2-piece Duran. It gives 4% whenever an ally, including herself, launches a follow-up attack. But once you max out the stacks, it even gives crit damage on top, free of charge. Very good set. But there is one more caveat. The shorter the fight, the more this piece goes downhill, as you need time to stack that bad boy. Then there's 2-piece Izumo. This set gives attack percent and then 12% crit rate when an ally follows the same path. Since some of her best teammates like the new March are Hunt, this will be usually fulfilled. That set should be the most common on your accounts, so at least you get something good in grabbing range. 2-piece Salsato is also a good alternative, giving 8% crit rate and an unconditional 15% damage for Fuas and ultimates. Note that they do not stack, since Feixiao does both ult and Fua damage on her ult, so you will only get 15% damage bonus, Buster. Generalist damage alternatives include Glamov, Rutilant, or Space Sealing Station. So what stats do you need on your Feixiao? Can you actually play attack boots on her? If you can somehow scrape 143 speed without boots, then yeah, go for it, good luck. But if not, stick with speed. As for the rest, you go crit body, wind sphere, and attack percent rope. Most of you can easily go crit damage on her body, as you can already get 29% crit rate from her kit, plus using Valorous and Izumo on her, and it's 44% if you add the signature, or even up to 61% with a maxed out F2P Lightcone, which makes building her a walk in the park. Substats are speed until 143, then crit and attack percent. There is no good hunt character without its trusty old weapon. And Feixiao comes with 2, an axe and a gunblade, because why not? But she also has a 3rd one under her sleeve, the Lightcone, which does the actual talking here. So which way, Western man? Feixiao's signature, the Venture 4th to Hunt, is in almost all cases her best in slot. It has a maximum base attack of 635 along with a very good passive. It gives 15% unconditional crit rate, as well as allowing you to ignore enemy defense with your ultimate when allies attack enemies. Up to 54%, which is a lot of defense to ignore. The good thing about this LC is that unlike Acheron, it only boosts her damage and doesn't change her gameplay. The next thing I'm going to say is very special case, but if you can pull it off, you can actually do more damage with Dr. Ratia's signature than her own. It gives crit damage based on how many debuffs an enemy has, as well as damage percent. On top, it allows follow-ups to ignore enemy defense after ultimate. This does, however, require 2 of the following: Topaz E1, Topaz S1, Aventurine S1. I know, lots of strings attached, but whoever has those can rejoice. The extra bonus with this weapon is that it will also affect her regular follow-ups and her skill, which is good news, as you are less reliant on her ultimate to kill small fries. In the night, Sealess Lightcone gives basic and skill damage based on speed, as well as ultimate crit damage. A very solid Lightcone. Then we have Worrisome Blissful, which is next up, featuring crit rate, follow-up damage and making enemies take more crit damage when Feixiao hits them. Incredibly solid Lightcone that has team utility. For your best F2P option, we have Cruising in the Stellar Sea. It has a monstrous amount of crit rate as well as a lot of attack percent after defeating an enemy. This Lightcone will suffer in a single target, but in other scenarios it will thrive. S5 Swordplay is a strong Lightcone that increases damage percent on enemies that have been hit repeatedly. Feixiao's issue with this Lightcone is that almost all of her attacks are only one hit, making stacking up this Lightcone a big chore. Plus it won't help you with crit rate in contrast to the F2P cone that is right there, but it's your next best budget option if you can't use the F2P LC. Other alternatives are Return of Darkness for its crit rate, Final Victor for its crit damage and attack percent, and Sleep Like the Dead for its crit buffs. Silence Remains for its crit and attack percent, and River Flows for the speed and damage percent. Feixiao as a character really wants to stack up her ultimate fast. In order to do that, you need teammates that attack a lot, and preferably they also have some way to buff Feixiao or debuff enemies. Starting with the most important partner, Robin. She is the follow-up support and going without her will be a big damage loss. I'm not gonna lie to you. Since Feixiao's teams will have so many attacks flying off and about, Robin will be getting plenty of energy for the insane ultimate of hers. In return, for all that energy, Robin provides Feixiao with a nuclear amount of attack, a downright stupid amount of damage percent, and if that wasn't enough, crit damage. But I think Robin's strength speaks for itself. Now if you don't have Robin, you can go with Ruan Mei. It's not as good, but you can come by. Ruan Mei returns yet again as the support that refuses to let a team go unclaimed, even when she is not supposed to be there. DOT, Xiao Q can't be her. Acheron, she is still a strong option, and even now with Feixiao they have special synergy. Aside from Ruan Mei's own buffing, her weakness break efficiencies are uniquely good with Feixiao, because she is mainly built for Apocalyptic Shadow, where breaking the enemy is key, which Ruan Mei helps with quite a bit. Now for your so-called sub-DPS character, the best pick will be Topaz. She's quite a classic, isn't she? And this is a give-give relationship. Feixiao gets out 2 follow-ups per turn, ignoring her ult, and Nambi gets advanced forward when the marked enemy is hit within 4. This means that Feixiao is increasing Topaz's damage, and Topaz returns the favor by reducing the enemy's resistance to follow-up. One issue that she does have is that when a wave starts, Topaz's mark is on a random enemy. This can be annoying if it targets the wrong enemy in a situation where you want to prioritize a specific enemy. And those extra Nambi attacks I mentioned, yeah, they're also helping Feixiao herself. Topaz is the best stacker for Feixiao's ultimate. Truly a great partnership. Maybe the IPC in Shanzhou should consider an alliance. Or maybe not, because Feixiao seems to be doing fine with her own bodyguard, Moza. He seems to be designed around dual carrying with Feixiao, even as his damage isn't nearly as impressive. He, much like Topaz, he has very frequent furs and makes enemies take more damage, and with his E2 he even makes them take more crit damage. No wonder the IPC and Shanzhou have tension in the story. Most tried taking Topaz's niche. So to prevent a war, we need a mediator, an ally of both sides. March the 7th. March is a unique character. Her strength does not rely on her amount of attacks, but rather her damage. Her damage is honestly quite good, and she also gives Feixiao crit damage. Nothing wrong here. She is uniquely powerful if you go with a Feixiao Bronya team, as she makes it so you don't need to speed tune. As March's follow-up from E2 will trigger Feixiao's second follow-up. Back to supports. Bronya and Sparkle are unique characters. Bronya will allow Feixiao herself to move more often, but it's not nearly as efficient as just using Topaz. And then Sparkle is in the same situation, but it's better because Feixiao gets to build max attack and actually has full uptime on Sparkle's buff. For sustains, Aventurine is obvious, thanks to his follow-ups helping Topaz as well as him just being a brain-dead shielder. Alternatives for sustains would be Ho-Ho, but she has SP issues, and then the classic Fushuan and Gallagher because they are just really good units. Alright, it's time that I tell you how well Feixiao actually does. Feixiao is a very interesting character. For the longest time, hunt characters just got badly outclassed. For MSC, you went by destruction and erudition for pure fiction. Even the new Apocalyptic Shadow, it's way more focused on weakness break rather than brute forcing a single target. This puts Hunt in a weird spot. So any new Hunt character has to fill big shoes to make a dent into this trend. So, how does Feixiao do? Ridiculously well. Feixiao is going to be top tier in both MOC and Apocalyptic Shadow. She gets 0 cycles done with ease, even with a sustain unit on board. A feat not accomplished by most. And in Apocalyptic Shadow, she kills the boss in less than 300 AV. For reference, you have 700 to play with for a 3-star clear. She is the strongest hunt character in the game and sets all our fears to rest. T0 for MOC, T0 for Apocalyptic Shadow, and as for pure fiction, yeah, maybe another time. And one more thing, she's at least, to me, fun to play. That kid just runs smooth with no shenanigans or tons of hoops to jump through. Alright, now let's talk E1 versus S1. Which one is better to power up your Feixiao? Feixiao's E1 is a pretty good one. It will increase the multiplier of attacks during the ultimate mode, but it takes time to stack up. It works like Acheron's A4, where it increases the MV itself instead of being a damage bonus. It gets pretty close to the S1 in terms of power, but really depends on your current Lightcone. I would say if you can get E2, go for E2, but if you can't, S1 is better. At least that's if you are stuck with Stellar C. On anything above Stellar C, you are free to get E1. The E1 is already discussed. E2 makes it so whenever an ally uses a follow-up attack, Feixiao gains 1 ult stack, up to 6 times per turn. This is an absurd amount of stacks and a massive damage increase. Do not sleep on that. E3 ult and basic level up. The ult is the main feat of Feixiao's damage, but talent increases tend to be disappointing in general. E4 will give Feixiao 8% speed after a follow-up and increases its toughness damage by 100%. This will greatly increase the speed of breaking, allowing Feixiao's ult to do the increased damage sooner. This is however not reflected in the sheet because it's hard to calculate this increase as there are too many factors. E5 levels skill and talent, pretty disappointing as E3 and E5 tend to be. E6 turns the regular follow-up into an ultimate as well. It increases its MV by 140%, and as if that wasn't enough, it also gives her ultimate 20% all-type rest ban. At this point, it's as if weaknesses are not a real thing. She will treat a neutral enemy as if it is wind weak, and an enemy with wind weakness, yeah, is even more screwed. Still not as OP as E2 though. Out of her Eidolons, the E2 and the E6 are the biggest power spikes, with E2 adding a whopping 50% to her numbers, and the E6 another 30%. So this is kind of another Ryan situation here. Alright, I hope you enjoyed this guide. If so, make sure to hit that like and sub button. This has been Neostar Impact, signing out.